Chapter 13. Geeta and Shailesh had sex once a month, but Geeta had not had an orgasm for years. Their sex was mechanical. He wouldn't even kiss her. He would do his business, roll off her, clean himself up, and fall asleep. A ritual she had learned to anticipate and dread at the same time. Her body felt cold and closed when he touched her, and she would squeeze her eyes, waiting for it to end soon. But she never complained. She believed it was the duty of a wife, and she performed it to the best of her ability, even though she had read somewhere that it could be called rape. But who would listen to a wife who didn't want sex? Everyone would just tell her it was a domestic issue, and they wouldn't get involved. Some months would elapse because she would claim to have her menstrual cramps, and he would let her be. Geeta often wondered how a man could go without sex for so long. She had trained herself to not feel anything for him, hence, not even desire sex. She hardly had anything to compare it to anyway. Shailesh and she had an arranged marriage, and he was the first and only man she had ever slept with. And if this was what everyone was raving about, then she really didn't care for sex at all. It was something she could do without. She was happy being frigid. That's the term he had used one night on her, and she had calmly accepted it. It was one of those mornings following a night when they had sex. Everything seemed right with the world, and everything felt wrong in her heart. Geeta felt her life was going nowhere. All she did was cook, clean, manage a house, look after her in-laws, and sit at home. She had no ambition left. She had no desire within her. There was no reason to live besides bringing up her children. Geeta sat in her room alone after the children and Shailesh had left for school and office. She wondered if this was what she had envisioned for her life. She was just a college graduate, something that Shailesh had said to her once to put her in her place, and she had never retaliated. It was a fact. She wondered if this world would ever give credit to a housewife. No matter how hard they work, it is presumed that a woman's duty is to look after an entirely new family and bear children for a man she had known for just a few years, or not at all. The woman's dreams, her ambitions, her choices are laid to rest as soon as she gets into wedlock. One fine day, she needs permission from her husband and her extra family to do the things she's dreamed of doing for so many years. It's a Lakshman Rekha that housewives need to adhere to suddenly, and no one can help them. Geeta sighed and looked at her watch. From today, Anu was joining an extra class of music and would be staying another hour at school. This meant that Geeta had more time to herself, and even more time with nothing to do. She found a joke on the internet and sent it to her friends on the WhatsApp group of lovely ladies. They all replied with a smiley. Then Natasha sent another joke back, and it was her turn to reply with a smiley. But Geeta didn't feel better. She couldn't spend her entire day, day after day, week after week, just sending jokes. She was getting claustrophobic. This didn't even feel like home. She missed Sahil. It had been a week since they last spoke. He was busy with work, and she realized that she craved for a conversation with him. She sent him a message asking what time he'll get home. He replied that he was working from home. Her heart skipped a beat as she asked him if she could meet him for a bit. He said, okay. She took a batch of fresh samosas she had made in the morning for the kids' tiffin as an excuse to meet him. She decided to take the stairs instead of the lift. Somehow, she didn't want to encounter anyone and have to fend off questions where she was going. People's prying eyes had always made her feel uncomfortable. She never knew what to say to people when they asked her probing questions. Apparently, they mistook her sweet smile of acknowledgement anywhere as a start to a conversation, and all she wanted to do was avoid them to the best of her ability. She wasn't a great conversationalist. She didn't know big words like Shailesh and couldn't impress many people. Even though she had read so many books and was up to date with technology, she wasn't an expressive person, so it was difficult for her to mingle. It had been a godsend to have women who came and chatted with her every day and pulled her into their crowd. And these three women were the closest she had to best friends. And yet, even with them, she couldn't share the deepest part of her life. Sahil opened the door with a smile. "You can't stay away from me, can you?" he asked with a mischievous smile. "If you're going to be like that, then I'm leaving." Geeta glared at him, but did not move an inch. She felt secretly happy that he could be his normal self around her. God knows what had got into her that day. Maybe there was nothing from his side, and she had just imagined the entire scenario. She needed to stop reading all those romantic novels. Sahil quickly said, "I promise to behave properly, madam." And just as Geeta glowered at him, he took the steel dabba from her hand and opened it. Wow! Samosas! Homemade! Oh, how I missed your food, even more than I missed you. He popped one samosa into his mouth. Geeta settled down on the sofa and looked at him. She could feel her heart expanding. Did he say he had missed me? Watching him eat all the samosas made her laugh heartily. All of a sudden, she knew that there was still reason for her to live. "Geeta, these are amazing," he said. "You're really the best." He wiped his mouth and looked at her warmly. "So tell me, what have you been up to?" Geeta replied by telling him about the children and their homework. Sahil interrupted her and said, "I didn't ask about the kids, Geeta. I asked about you. I get to hear enough about the kids when I meet Mummy and Papa. And the kids talk to me plenty for me to know you're raising them very well. Renuka comes first in her class, and for a 4-year-old, Anu is such a great singer. Obviously, it's all your hard work and dedication. I wanted to know what's new in your life." Geeta sat quietly. She didn't know what to say. Sahil probably knew an assortment of women who had happening lives. She, meanwhile, was nothing of that. She was a simple housewife. What could she possibly tell him? She cleared her throat. "Well, nothing really. You know, we've known each other for some 12 or 13 years since you got married. And we've never chatted about anything but Shailesh and the children. In fact, you've hardly spoken to me about anything else. I know it's partly my fault because I wasn't around so much and I didn't want to interfere in your life. But now, with both the babies grown up, you have time to just be and talk to me. So tell me about you." Geeta nodded. "All my life I've looked after everyone. I really had nothing to say. I don't have any hobbies. I'm not good at anything. And I'm a regular housewife. I've always seen you climbing in your career and mingling with so many different women. You're the one with the exciting life. You tell me about you." Sahil came over and sat next to her. And this time, Geeta didn't move away. He said, "Yes, I've had different women. It's been quite an interesting ride. But you know what, Geeta? I've never really wanted a long-term relationship. So to make the kind of commitment that you and Shailesh have is quite commendable." Geeta snorted and looked away. Commendable. Any fool can get married. But it takes commitment to stick to your career. Where am I today? Nowhere. When I was in college, I wanted to become a professional. And then I got engaged in my 3rd year and got married. It was done so quickly that I had no say in it. Sahil looked at her quizzically. She continued, "Please don't get me wrong, Sahil." She gently put a hand on his arm and pleaded, "Please don't say anything to Mummy, Papa or Shailesh or my parents. They'll kill me and I'll have no place to go." Sahil put his hand on top of Geeta's. "Relax, Geeta. I'm not like that. I won't tell them. This is just between you and me. And you'll always have a place here. Remember that." Geeta was relieved. She leaned back on the sofa, her warm chestnut hair falling carelessly over her face and breasts. In her cream-colored kurta and clean face, she looked far more beautiful than any woman in a fancy dress or makeup that Sahil had ever seen. She was petite and flower-like. Her smooth skin glowed with pale golden undertones, and he could feel himself drawn to her pure, innocent beauty. No mother of two had ever been as attractive as Geeta was, Sahil thought. He yearned to stroke her hair and tell her how special she was. Couldn't she see how important she was to the entire family? His world had changed since she walked into their house. His parents depended on her. His brother would be a mess without her. And he? Sahil sighed and tried to control his beating heart. He desired her like nothing in this world. He wanted to give her so much love, knowing how she lacked that in her life. But all he could do was give her space to be who she wanted to be, and an ear to hear her whenever she needed to speak. Of course, he knew the food was just an excuse she was making to see him. If only he could make 1,000 more to see her every minute of his day as well. Geeta, talk to me. Tell me what you're thinking. Sahil moved slightly away, giving her space to feel and speak. And Geeta finally spoke from her heart, something that she had never done in so many years with anyone. It was as if a dam had burst. Girls from small towns aren't allowed to think. They don't know what they want until they realize that what they have isn't what they need. I could never find myself because before I even knew the world, I was married and pregnant. My parents hadn't told me about birth control, and when I started feeling sick, I went with your cousin Nandini to the doctor, who asked me, "Do you want to keep it?" What could I have said? No, it was too soon. I've only had sex once. I didn't know what was the safe period and even how to raise a child, and here I was already with one. He put his hand on her shoulder as a comforting gesture. Oh, Geeta. He didn't know she was a virgin till she got married. His stupid brother should have been more careful. How was this poor girl supposed to know about contraceptives when no one had told her? An abortion would have made her feel very guilty. Oh, how he wished he had been there for her in the early years of her marriage. But his instant attraction to her then just made him stay away. He plunged himself in work and women to camouflage his true feelings that were brimming for his brother's new wife. Tears started flowing from her eyes. It was the first time that anyone had cared to ask her about her choices, her feelings, and truly listen to her without interrupting. There was a boy who used to chase me when I got on a rickshaw after college. All the people saw it and told my father. That's when he set up this rishta. It was all done so fast, Sahil. She took a long pause before continuing. I don't have any regrets. I'm just saying that I wish I could be something more than someone's mother or someone's wife. I wish I had that chance. I've not been able to pursue any hobby. He didn't even allow. Shailesh and I... Geeta trailed off, unsure whether she should tell her husband's brother the gory details of how bad the sex life was, or how he had suppressed every desire in her to work or succeed in anything. A hot, exultant tear rolled down her cheek. Shailesh and you what? He asked. And she shook her head. She decided to just let it be. He need not know. She continued. I haven't seen the world. I haven't travelled anywhere. Shailesh doesn't care anymore. I don't know if he ever did, or he just married me to make his parents happy. Geeta bawled her eyes out. Sahil stroked her back while she hunched over and cried. When she had finished, he gave her a handkerchief and she wiped away her tears. He smoothed her hair away from her face in a loving gesture, and Geeta looked at him with a feeble smile. His gaze travelled over her face and studied her eyes. She was so beautiful, so pure and vulnerable. All she needed was love and attention. Sahil couldn't help himself anymore. He leaned over and gently, ever so softly, covered her mouth with his. The kiss sent the pit of her stomach into a wild swirl. This was wrong. So terribly wrong. But she closed her eyes and lost herself in him. He wrapped his arms around her midriff and pulled her closer to him as he kissed her again, softly caressing the corners of her mouth with his lips. Geeta kissed him back with a hunger that belied her outward calm. Her heart felt such peace, while her mind raced in 1,000 directions. Suddenly, she pulled away and pushed him back. She sat up and straightened herself out. This is wrong, Sahil. We can't do this. What just happened? He looked at her as a man possessed with love. What just happened? Passion is what just happened. Something that you haven't had for years. It's not wrong, Geeta. Don't stop your heart from finally being free. A flood of emotions went through her. This had never happened to her before. Not in a million years would she have thought that she would be disloyal to her husband. She who worshipped the institution of marriage, who had given everything to her family. Now she had become an adulteress. She knew it wasn't his fault, but she needed to blame someone for her infidelity. She stood up. What rubbish are you talking? You think you can take advantage of me because I told you my story? Because I shared something deep inside me? How could you? Sahil stood up and took her hand. I didn't take advantage of you, Geeta. You're beautiful. I was just attracted to you. I'm sorry. He didn't mention how ardently she had kissed him back. Geeta looked flustered and extremely nervous. What if someone finds out? Shit! What'll happen? Sahil said calmly. No one is going to find out because we're not going to tell anyone. And nothing is going to happen. Just chill. But Geeta wouldn't hear it. She didn't know what had come over her. Sahil made her sit down while he went and got her a glass of water. He knelt beside her as she gulped the whole glass down. He spoke to her calmly. Geeta, I'm sorry. I'll never do that again. It's just that today, you looked even more gorgeous than you generally do. I've always wanted to tell you how I admire you. Admire me? Geeta looked at him with curiosity. How could a man who had lived completely on his own terms admire a housewife and mother who hadn't achieved anything? Sahil nodded. You're incredible, and you don't even know it. And you have people around you who can't see it. His vitality was compelling, his magnetism so potent that Geeta felt drawn to him. But she knew that this conversation would lead to nothing good. Finally, when she had composed herself, she stood up and walked towards the door. Please, Sahil, if you admire me, promise me something. Anything. You will never speak of this afternoon with anyone ever in your life. Of course. Why would I? And you will leave me alone. Forever. Without waiting for an answer, Geeta walked out of the door. She couldn't accept the dull ache in her heart. She'd been so lost in that kiss. She'd finally felt free after so many years. Her mind told her that she needed to get as far away from Sahil as she possibly could to keep her family intact. Her heart just refused to listen. Somewhere, deep down, she knew that even though he would keep his promise, she was unsure if she could listen to her mind for too long.